Today, I'm going to try to draw this unruly mass of texture in Tallinn, Estonia. And if you've watched pretty much any of my other videos, you're more than likely raising an eyebrow, shaking your head, or questioning my every word because you know that this was unlike me. I love to talk about my inability and hatred of drawing textures. And, well, I guess I love a challenge because this is what I have for you today. Let's get into it. So right off the bat, you'll see that I'm doing these sharp, quick lines. And these are for the tall blades of grass that are directly in front of me and actually sit just outside of the reference video. However, since they're pretty vague, they could serve as really anything in the scene, which I knew at the time, so I didn't really see it as an issue. And actually, you can see some of them in front of me in the right frame, the drawing portion of the video. Anyway, I'm doing two things here to suggest those shapes. The first is obviously these, the tall, slightly curved lines that shoot straight up and out of the ground. And the second is a similar approach, but I'm including a flatter top section connected to a downward point. Hopefully, you'll be able to see that. I'm suggesting those blades that are either bent over or are facing me rather than the other simpler ones veering off side to side. I haven't learned this from anywhere or spent any time practicing it. It's just what those shapes looked like to me in the moment. So I just did my best to simplify them and combine them with the other simpler ones. I think for what I was going for, it worked pretty well. At this foreground stage, I'm feeling pretty confident that I can make something of all this. And that feeling continues through to the middle area. Right now, I'm working my way from the bottom of the reference to the top, so basically from front to back, if you think of it depth-wise. I'm trying to notice all of the little things that sit directly in front of me. So these big, pointy triangular shapes are first, since nothing should overlap with them. Then there are these clumps of flowers spread about, followed by some more tall, grassy plants, which you'll see later. And lastly, the tree, or actually trees, although I only really cared about the central one. Ironically enough, that tree was meant to be the focus. You can actually see that that's where I've literally set the focus of the camera. But I also wanted to include as much of this lush foreground as possible. The ironic part is how much attention I end up giving to the foreground and middle ground, so much so that I probably should have focused on them, in camera, that is. You'll see what happens to the tree in just a minute. So after yesterday's big talk on references, I won't go on and on about this, but landing on this as a reference came with a few layers. The concept of this field alone would not be appealing to me. Like if someone said I should draw this kind of thing, I'd probably vehemently disagree. As my attitude in previous videos has suggested, I hate this kind of stuff. But the reality of it in this state at this time of day with these colors, all that stuff, I think changes everything. I've mentioned how picky I can be when it comes to choosing references. And it's funny because that pickiness isn't just the concrete components of the scene. Again, if somebody was to tell me to draw a dense field of green with some trees in the background, that wouldn't sound appealing. But here, I was pulled in by the depth of this foreground, however dense, thanks to the smattering of these white flowers. I liked the diffuse, overcast lighting because it softened the crunchy contrast that scenes like these can often contain. And thanks to these things, I think it made for a nice video, which also does play a major role in making these. I will seldom decide on something to draw without first considering how it will translate to video and vice versa. Pickiness comes in a multitude of forms, and it's vanquished in just as many. Here you'll see that I've begun drawing some of these flowers, and it was around this point when I realized I didn't have as firm a grasp as I expected. The flowers themselves I knew would be highly simplified, that I shouldn't take them too seriously as long as I communicated the basic idea, which is kind of left over in my head from the flowers I did in Poland, if you recall those. but their stems became something of a rude awakening for me. So it's here that I started to notice that I had two pretty significant problems from this point on, and I didn't know how to fix either one of them. The first is that the entire foreground lacked density. I thought that that might be okay, just another thing I could maybe apply through the use of negative space. But thanks to the second problem, that the stems of the flowers were technically no different than any of the other vertical lines on the paper, I would be forced, in a sense, into adding just enough density to imply them, which would in turn negate the whole negative space thing. Either way, one big mass of ambiguity would follow. From my current detached perspective, the me that you're listening to, it might have been smart for me to focus a lot more attention on the flowers, maybe ignoring their stems altogether, implying the density along with where the flowers came from, like implying both of those things. But I couldn't find that solution in the field. And wow, as far as puns go, it doesn't get any better than that. Anyway, I decided to differentiate the flower stems from everything else, which, to be fair to past me, I was trying to make them look the way they looked in real life. I just didn't consider how silly it would end up looking. Also, thanks to this mild fixation, I'm losing any sense of depth that I felt like I was building up to in the beginning. Those sharp grassy lines had me pretty excited, but you can clearly see now that I'm losing the forest for the trees. Right. Well, we've chatted quite a bit about the drawing, so let's get lost in a little tangent. I'd like to talk about progress, and more specifically, my feelings about the current state of it. I've gone way in depth on this in a previous video. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which, because everything I do and say and draw on this channel is like one big blur once I finish each video. So please go watch them all, and you'll surely find what you're looking for. Also, please, for the love of God, subscribe to the channel and like this video and share it with every single person you know. So progress. I feel like I'm back in another dip, or maybe the dip I was in previously is ongoing, maybe with a few molehills along the way to keep my spirits up. But overall, things seem to be either diminishing or stuck, and what a feeling that is. I knew going into this that there would be endless struggles, but knowing something conceptually and experiencing it are two wholly disparate things. And while I do think I was prepared for it, morale has certainly taken a hit. Thankfully, my awareness of the power of consistency is alive and well, and it's what got me to do this whole thing in the first place. I knew that practicing a lot is the way people typically get good at things. You don't have to do it every day necessarily, especially when it means filming and subsequently sharing it. That part's not as important. But you do have to do it often, whatever that means to you. To me, that does mean every day, or I lose focus too easily. Just a few days away from a practice has me questioning the entire thing. It halts my progress, strips me of my discipline, and takes away the drive that had me pursue it to begin with. So doing this consistently, which for me means every day, has been locked in from the start, since before I started this. It's a non-negotiable. I knew that it wouldn't feel all that great for a really long time. I knew that I'd have to be content with absolutely sucking for months, maybe even years, but that it would be worth it if I didn't give up. I've spoken before about why I wanted to do this and how I want it to be a significant piece of my life. And acknowledging that comes with some personal agreements. If I was only willing to try if it meant a week or two of struggle at most, I would fail, inevitably. And I knew I'd fail. So I started this process expecting my drawings to be genuinely hideous for a year or more. A year is the timeline I had in mind. And luckily, the drawings aren't hideous, or at least I don't think so. So I don't have to worry about necessarily exceeding that deadline, but I also know that the goalpost moves, and if I'm not careful, I could go for a year or more and get to a point where I feel like I've plateaued indefinitely. For example, every drawing I've done thus far in Tallinn has made me feel like I'm only sliding backwards. The better me knows that for all months combined, that won't be true. But from my perspective, on a day-to-day level, it really does feel that way. Even though I might have a better grip on foliage than I did a month ago, it doesn't feel like it, and I can't stress that enough. However, with those tools that I've mentioned, with the wisdom I've gained through learning other mediums in the past, with my knowledge of self, I can get outside of all that and see it for what it really is. Progress comes slowly, it ebbs and flows. And by zooming out, I can better understand and respect the process over time rather than myopically judge it for today. Also, just to be perfectly clear, literally zero of this is to be self-aggrandizing or congratulatory. I've just spent a lot of time thinking about this kind of thing and how it manifests in my life, and I know what my priorities are. I'm not special by any means, so I don't want it to sound like that. By no means do I have all the answers. This is just the stuff that works for me, and as this is a series about the process and my progress through it, I think it's relevant to discuss. Anyway, you might be wondering then, cool, so with all that, you don't like this one either. And you'd be right, I don't really like it. Nothing really feels there, and I don't appreciate that. For what felt like a lot of work, there's very little to show for it, and it makes me wonder where my time went. Like I said, I started off reasonably strong, although I wish I could have done a better job with the density, only to end things with a half-baked tree in the distance. Had I given it my undivided attention, letting it sharply and boldly sprout out of the admittedly vague foreground, I think everything would be different. But that's not what I did, so it is what it is. Yeah, let me know what you think. Leave a comment with your opinion, any constructive criticism or recommendations, and also subscribe to the channel, please. I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.